This is the Nobel Podcast, where we talk about how to optimize your technology, life, and mind. We're joined by special operations veterans, entrepreneurs, investors, and others who have overcome difficulty to make it to the top of their craft by staying in the fight. Welcome to the Nobel Podcast. This is Sam Alaimo. I'm joined by Rob Huberty, and our guest today is Otis McGregor, founder of Tribe and Purpose. He's an author, a speaker, a podcast host, and a retired lieutenant colonel in the Army Special Forces. Otis, welcome.
Hey, great to be here, guys. Happy to share some of my experience to help others.
We're stoked to have you. We'll start where we always do. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Texas. Grew up in Fort Worth. I went to Texas A&M and the Corps of Cadets and had all kinds of good fun that would get you arrested now. Fortunately, my timing was just right for the things I got to do and did. I enlisted in the Guard while I was a cadet. I was a tank driver somewhere behind me. If you look really hard and mixed in with the books right there, that's the 49th Armored Division patch, Lone Star. I was a tank driver for about a year and a half, and then I was a TC, tank commander, and then I became I switched and became a LRSU. Not many people know what LRSU, Long Range Reconnaissance Surveillance. It's the recce team for the Armored Division. And I did that my last year before getting commissioned.
Did the Corps of Cadets. What was your earliest memory of wanting to join the military?
Well, my dad was a aerospace engineer at General Dynamics, right next to Carswell Air Force Base outside of Fort Worth. I think it's now Naval Air Station, Carswell. And I grew up in the Cold War era of watching the B-52s fly over and going to bomb the Soviet Union out of existence, and then thankfully getting a phone call to return home. And I always dreamed of being a fighter pilot because that's what my dad, as an aerospace engineer, that's what he designed. His first big project was the F-16. And, as a kid, I got to sit in the F-16 and, do all these kind of cool stuff. And my freshman year in high school, I went to Dad's office there at home and said, "Dad, I want to be a fighter pilot." And he said, "Son, you can't." I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Well, you wear glasses. Pilots aren't allowed to wear glasses." And I said, "Well, I'll just join the Air Force." He's like, "You don't want to do that. You're not a pilot in the Air Force. You ain't shit." Dad didn't say shit. Dad doesn't cuss. But whatever phrase he said, you ain't gonna get anywhere and you won't like it unless you're a pilot in the Air Force. And I said, "Fine." I kind of hung my head and walked out. And next day I said, "I got it. I'll join the Army. Screw the Air Force." And that was what set me on that path. That's why I ended up at Texas A&M because, the interesting thing when I reflect back on it, those choices made early on, I had no desire to go to the military academy. Even though I was dead set, Dad had said, "Don't enlist, go to school." Dad's very big on education. Go to school, get your education, go in as an officer. And he's, guided me in that path. And I never even looked at West Point. There was something about everything being the same at West Point, right? Whereas Texas A&M, you're a small fish in a big pond, even as a cadet. You're 2,000, and when I was at A&M, there was 30,000 students. So 2,000, do the math there, whatever that equates to, 10% or less of the student body. So it was a much broader education, and that was also what led me to enlisting. Was I wanted to learn what being a soldier was like before I led soldiers. So, yeah, that was how I got there. That's how I got that. The only other school I applied to was Penn State because I thought I was going to play a linebacker for them or something like that. I don't know.
I have a couple questions about the differences. So, one of my close friends in the military went to Texas A&M, and he was not part of the Corps of Cadets, and he ended up enlisting out of it as well. What was it like going to a college that, presumably is, good at football, good at sports, big fun school, but then, you have to put a uniform on from time to time, but not all the time, whereas the service academies are, buttoned up all the time. How different was that? Did you ever have that moment where you said, what am I doing here, when you're wearing a uniform in the hot sun and you see, people going out to party and you're doing, marching or whatever it is?
I don't recall ever having that feeling of looking on the other side and saying, oh, look how much it sucks. Yeah. And I think probably what it was, the reason I didn't have that feeling is because misery loves company. And I had my classmates with me. And it sucked for them just as much as it sucked for me, standing in formation. We did morning formations and evening formations. We marched to chow, marched to breakfast, marched to dinner. Had to wear a uniform to every building on campus when I was there. There was no, other than going to the PE class, you could wear shorts and a T-shirt. Every other time, even to go meet my girlfriend for coffee in the Memorial Student Center, I had to be in Class B's to go into that building. So yeah, there were some times where this kind of sucks, but you were there with 2,000 of your closest mates who were doing the same stupid or really beneficial stuff like that. The traditions at A&M, they've changed, of course, as times have changed, but several of the things like wearing a uniform and teaching you how to wear a uniform, that's important, and taking care of your room and having room inspections and all those sort of things like you do at a military academy, and to include study time required sitting at my desk my freshman and sophomore year, Sunday through Thursday night. I don't remember. I think it was like 7:30 to 9:30 or something like that. We had to be at our desk studying. But you know what? At 9:30 on Thursday night, I was meeting up with my girlfriend and we were going to the Dixie Chicken and drinking pitchers of beer. So, and then you get up in the next morning and run 5 miles or whatever, because you weren't supposed to do something according to the upperclassmen, and got the best of both worlds is the way I look at it. And that's why I went to A&M, to get the best of both worlds. I enlisted, beginning of the spring semester, my freshman year. I enlisted. Yeah. I went to basic training that summer.
Did a lot of other guys do that, or were you kind of an anomaly?
Pretty much an anomaly. I had two upperclassmen, and they were the ones that kind of singled me out and were my mentors growing up. They were juniors when I was a freshman. And Chris Blockus and Kenny Crawford, still stay in touch with them. And they were the ones, hey, we got this National Guard unit, weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. You can make some extra beer money. And there's this whole Montgomery GI Bill thing and all this sort of stuff, and get some extra money for school. And guess what? You get to learn about being in the Army. I was like, cool. I'm going to the Army anyways. Might as well start now. So yeah, that was how I got into it. It's not like I saw a commercial and said, oh, I should do this.
You enlisted. Did you have special forces in your mind's eye as a goal, or did that just come about after your days riding around in tanks?
Yeah, when I was a tanker, I realized I didn't want to be a tanker. I did not like the idea of driving around in a steel coffin. I could not wait to get my feet on the ground. That was why I went to LURSU, because yes, I all I ever wanted to do my 4 years at A&M was to be commissioned as an infantry officer and go to the Ranger Regiment. It's all I ever wanted to do. The Army saw different, said, we need engineers, not infantry guys. And I happen to have a piece of paper that says engineer on it. Unfortunately, at least that's the way I always joke about it, is unfortunately, I have this piece of paper. So the Army made me an engineer. And all I could think of was, well, how do I get into the Ranger Regiment? And as I started down my path, after getting commissioned as an engineer and learning more about things in the Army, I'd heard we had a master sergeant at the school in the ROTC who was a Green Beret. And so I'd heard of it, didn't know a whole lot, started reading some books about it. And when I got commissioned as an engineer, it kind of sealed my path, because I said, then I'm going Green Beret. I had kind of had visions of it, go to the regiment, spend some time in the regiment and then go Green Beret. But when I didn't get to go to the regiment, I said, you know what? Raise my hand, go be a Green Beret. And that's what did it, because just wanted to be challenged, pushed, be part of the best.
What year, what time frame are we talking about here?
Well, I graduated from college in '87, and I went to Alaska for 4 years, left Alaska. Well, while in Alaska, that's when I raised my hand to be a Green Beret. Left there in '92 and got awarded my Green Beret in '94.
I'm trying to think about timelines. So this was around the Mogadishu time frame. Did that inspire you, influence you at all?
No, hardly knew anything about it. Got to remember, information at that time, you read it, it was dropped off at your front doorstep. So, I read, like I said, I read a lot of books about special ops in Vietnam, and that was really the gist of it. I'm trying to think, what year was Moog? Was that 90?
91 or 92, I think.
Yeah, 91, 92. So I was already on the path. I'd already filled out the paperwork and been selected to go to selection at that point. Gulf War I happened while we were in Alaska, which I always laugh about when I think about it, because pretty much everybody, I was in the 6th Infantry Division, and I was in the 6th Engineer Battalion. Pretty much everybody in the division was putting in a 4187. And for those of you who don't know, that's a general Army, still exists, Army document to request something different. And everybody was putting in 4187s to be reassigned to the units that were going to the war. And our division commander published a order, letter, whatever the hell the right, memorandum that said, anybody that submits a 4187 for transfer will receive an Article 15, which is non-judicial punishment. You call it in the Navy mast, captain's mast. Then we were told we were going to do critical infrastructure protection, which was one of the roles of 6th Infantry Division, at least back then, which is, the oil, all the oil wells and the pipelines and the pumping stations and all that stuff. And the company that owned it at the time, I don't remember who it was now, I want to say Alaska, basically said, yeah, no thanks. So we protected the snow around Fairbanks from Saddam Hussein. And I will say he did not get one single snowflake during that war. So we were highly successful.
So even at this time, though, I'm, from pop culture in an unextraordinary way, did John Wayne or Sylvester Stallone have any influence? Rambo or that? Because that came out before both of the,
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. I mean, the Green Beret, John Wayne's movie, The Green Beret.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to say my homage to him. I got a Green Beret statue that is John Wayne, right there on my shelf. And then, of course, First Blood.
Yeah.
We're all wanting to jump off a cliff and bounce through a tree and then sew our arm back up with, the canvas muscle shirt that we made ourselves.
He could eat things that would make a billy goat puke. I don't know why, but that works.
Yeah, that was a classic. And I'm sure, not that I remember saying, watching that, I've got some friends, Green Beret friends, that'll tell you, yeah, man, Dad showed me that movie and I was hooked. I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I saw it. I mean, of course I've watched it. At this point in life, I've seen it a bunch, both of them. But was that a critical piece? I don't remember. I think it was probably more the books that I read, about the, like those operations that went into Laos, those guys that did that stuff, the A-team operations that out in camps, alone and unafraid. That was just some badass shit, man. I mean, what those boys did in Vietnam, a 12-man team, 10-man team, plop, middle of the jungle. That was some SF shit right there. We did a little bit of it in Afghanistan, but it was our risk tolerance isn't high enough to do that kind of shit anymore.
Those guys were cool. I read a lot of those books as well and was inspired by them, along with pop culture in your day. I don't remember what year Red Dawn came out, but for some reason as a kid.
Truthfully, that probably influenced me more. The unconventional warfare aspect of Red Dawn. Yeah, that's that's classic, especially now that I live in Colorado, because, I got a safe house up in the mountains. Anybody that knows a thing or two should have a safe house up in the mountains.
When you look back from what you know now, you didn't want West Point because it was hyper regimented. Are you glad you ended up with SF and not the Rangers, given the personality distinctions between the two?
Oh, hell yeah. I will never admit it publicly that the Army knew what it was doing, making me an engineer. But the experience I gained as a engineer lieutenant, because I got to do some pretty cool stuff. My platoon, the platoon I had for a little over a year, was the equipment platoon for the entire light infantry division. So I had several million, I don't remember what the count is nowadays, 10, 15, $20 million worth of heavy equipment in a light infantry division, from bulldozers to backhoes to bucket loaders, dump trucks. And every guy in my platoon drove a piece of equipment. There was no, backups, or it was, Private Smith owned that bulldozer. That was his bulldozer. And the stuff that we got to do up in the tundra, in the frozen tundra, was amazing because, exercises for us as engineers were a month long, but the actual FTX was usually like 4 or 5 days, maybe 7 at the very most, because we'd go out and set up, move the snow to open up the roads. Then the log guys would come, set up all the log stuff, and we're still clearing roads, firing positions, and all this stuff. And then the maneuver elements would come out, and they'd get set up, and then they'd do the force on force exercise, and then they'd leave, and then the logistics would leave, and then we'd leave. And so when we went to the field, it was, we had an exercise. I was in Alaska for 4 years, and we had an exercise every January that the week after New Year's, we deployed. And so the experience that I got in cold weather, leadership, harsh living conditions and environment. Yeah, I've lived in some shitholes, but the conditions were never as harsh as they were those 4 years in Alaska, 40 below for 10 days, 70 below. You name the extremisms, and, it's just a thing. Yeah.
What was the most striking aspect of Special Forces selection? Were you shocked by anything? Did anything give you a particularly hard time? Walk us through that.
I'm trying to think. Selection. See, I had this weird, and I still do, attitude of, all right, I'll just do the best I can. And selection was that. I believe I'm a good team player and a decent leader. And when I went into selection, it's just another gut check. And, growing up playing sports, spending a lot, I grew up as a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout. Hell, I was doing, as a Boy Scout, to jump back, we did a chicken survival weekend. Another one of those things that ain't happening anymore. You and a buddy were given a live chicken. You got a sleeping bag each and a peach can. I don't know why we always said peach can, but a peach can, empty, that you could put anything in that wasn't food. Tools, matches, aluminum foil, and a live chicken. They drop us off Friday night, hand us a map, and said, be here Sunday morning for pancakes. 12 years old doing that shit. I started young. And so when I went through selection, yeah, it was hard. I'm not downplaying the effort of the suck fest that selection is, the lack of sleep. They fed you good. It and just the physical effort, and some mental, but just the physical effort and, working with people. I don't remember, Sandman, what was, I can't remember the names of the other events that we would do. It was just a thing. To me, it was like, all right, this is what I got to do to get to be what I want to be. And that's the way I did it. I can think of, there was in the Q course, when I went through, the officers were the only ones that did this event called Troy Trek. And Troy Trek was a 3 to 4 day land nav in the Uwharrie Forest. and you didn't know how many points you were getting. You couldn't use roads, of course, because it's land navigation, and the instructors were looking for you. And I loved that freaking event. I just was like, cool. I'm in the woods by myself. I got to go from here to there. That's cool, man. What's next? And, we lost like half our class in that event that all got recycled because they screwed up. So those sort of things, yeah, I remember them, but I honestly don't remember like, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to get there. I was stressed. Of course, I was worried about doing it because you don't know what the answer is, right? And when you don't know what the answer is, how can you, unless you're just one of them arrogant, cocky assholes, you don't know, right? So you just have to give it your best. And that was kind of the way I looked at it. Now, if I had ended up with my buddies in that recycle pool, the recycle truck driving down the road, yeah, that would have fucking sucked, man. Sorry about the cussing, but there's no doubt my attitude would probably be different about what Troy Trek was. But for me, it was like, I was Peter Rabbit. Don't throw me in the briar patch. That's the way I was.
Given the timeline we're talking about here, where were you when 9/11 happened?
I was here at 10th Group at Fort Carson. I was the Battalion S3. I had about a month or so ago, prior to that, did a change of command of my company. And I was now the Battalion S3 when it happened. And I can remember the urge, the desire to do something. I think that was the most frustrating thing, was just give us something to do. Give us something to do. I mean, packing, unpacking, training, guessing that, well, we need to get a range to do this, or we need to get vehicles to do this, or we should go, ruck in the mountains, or we had no clue what to do. We just were doing something. And I'll always remember getting phone calls from our brothers in 5th Group asking us about what kind of mountain gear and cold weather gear and all this sort of stuff they should have to go into the mountains of Afghanistan. And we're just sitting there going, I mean, we didn't get the call, That's for once, the military, the special ops community actually had something happen and stuck with the regional expertise of the groups. So I thought, irony in hindsight, 20 some odd years later, 24, almost 24 years later, how ironic that was, that's the one time, because we had just finished years of doing Bosnia and Kosovo. I had deployed my company to Kosovo and had some unbelievable operations and things going on there that we did, which were at the time, goes around, comes around, because we were the fleshy tip of the spear for Bosnia and Kosovo. And all the other groups were back going, man, 10th Group's getting to do all the cool guy stuff. Well, then 9/11 happened, and we got to sit here at Fort Carson and watch it on TV. So
I want to get into post 9/11, but how was that tour, and what kind of action did you guys see?
For which one? I'm sorry.
Kosovo.
Oh, I went there twice. So I went right when I went as a information operations officer. That's a dark period of my career. The deployment wasn't, but the job and the organization I was in was. So I went there the first time, right when we set everything up, basically rolled in with the, invasion unit, whatever the hell we were called. And then I went back with my company, my Special Forces company, Charlie Company 210, and had an unbelievable time. I was commanding a task force that nowadays at least a colonel or a one-star would be in charge of. I had my 6 ODAs. I had an ODA from the 1st Battalion in Stuttgart. I had a platoon of SEALs and the Ranger Regimental Recon, and a squad of Seabees, all attached to my company with me in charge. And we had a great relationship with the ground commander, Colonel Close, brigade commander in Big Red 1. And he trusted us 100% to do the right thing. And My guys would give me a brief. I would accept or deny the mission operation depending on what was going on and what they were requesting to do. And I would tell Colonel Close, this is what we're going to do. And he says, Roger that. Tell me if you need anything. And then I'd send a slide deck. This is back in, the old days when a two megabyte slide deck, took 2 hours to get through an email. I'd send the slide deck for approval up to my boss at SOCUR, General Fuller, who's still a good personal friend of mine. And he'd call me up and say, what do you think, Otis? I said, well, here's some risks, sir. He said, you got it? I said, Roger that, sir. He said, okay, execute. And we did, I don't know how many different missions. We did recce missions and into the border, into Serbia and things like that. And some other classified stuff that, pre 9/11 was the fleshy end of the spear. And so I always joke that, goes around, comes around. So when 9/11 happened and then 5th Group got the call, well, they figured, 10th Group, you got your turn. So
you retired 2009, 9/11, 2001. How did that period in between go? How many times you deploy? Where did you get to go? How kinetic was it?
Yeah, I remember at that point, I was a senior guy. So, as a Special Forces company commander, you're a major in 2004. When I left group and went to Spacecom and then Northcom, and when I was at Spacecom is when the Desert Storm 2 happened, the invasion part. And I got to watch that on some highly classified videos on a stupid exercise in Korea. Then I went over to SOCUR, and when I got to SOCUR, because my bosses at Northcom and Spacecom wouldn't let me deploy. So when I got to SOCUR, the first thing I did, I went into my boss. I was in the J5 shop. Went to my boss in the J5 shop, who was an Air Force colonel. And he's like, yeah, sure, man, but you really got to check with a 3. And I was like, easy money. Because the 3, a good friend of mine, Mark Rosengard, we were at 10th Group together. So I went in, told him, said, hey, I got to get in the box, dude. I'm not going to get out of the Army with a war going on and never having been there. So got down there. I got to do some pretty cool stuff, working both sides of the fence with the unit and Balad and the Special Forces Task Force there in Balad, doing some good, all staff stuff. I tell people that, I was deployed, but the stuff I was doing, I wasn't sleeping in my bed at home, and I worked 18, 20 hours a day and had a really good gym, right? And a decent chow. But other than that, I was doing staff shit the whole time. And then I went back again, I don't know, a handful of months. I got a phone call. When you get a phone call in Germany at about 8:00 at night with a DC number, you answer it and you're like, okay, what's this? And, families all around. It's like, I go to the closet and talk. And, a general was putting together a team to go to Baghdad and wanted me to be part of that team. And I always remember saying, well, can I say no? The guy, the staff officer I was talking to, he's like, no. It's like, well, then why didn't you just send me freaking orders, dude? Why are we making a big deal about this? Let's just send me orders and I'll freaking pack my stuff and we'll go. So I went back down to Iraq and helped stand up. Our job was to stand up the Iraqi National Counterterrorism Force.
But would you have said no?
No.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know if I could have. Do I get an option? Right? You gotta ask that question, right? But no, of course not. I wouldn't have said no. I was still chomping at the bit. Like I did for any other thing that ever happened in my career. It's like, send me.
Always chasing the war.
Oh man, running to the sound of gunfire, right? Yeah, that was a really cool mission because the genesis of it was a cocktail napkin. Very much similar to when I came, what was going on at the same time that I deployed to Iraq was we were standing up the NATO Special Operations Force. That's when Admiral McRaven was my boss. And that literally started with a cocktail napkin of what if it looked like this sort of thing. And that's where the NATO Special Operations, now headquarters, started. And when I came back from Iraq, that's what I went into, was that, which meant I got to go to Afghanistan a couple of times to bring the tribes together. That was the way we looked at it, because we had a handful of NATO guys, a handful of black ops, a handful of white ops, and our goal was to get everybody working together as a team. So, yeah, that was a pretty cool mission. I refer to that. So, one of the Special Forces missions, other than direct action and unconventional warfare, is foreign internal defense. And foreign internal defense is developing a host nation's capability to protect themselves. And when I was at NATO SOF, I referred to that as doing my foreign internal defense at the doctorate level, because I was in the 3 shop and I traveled around like a rock star with the Admiral, going to ministers of defense and, commanders of special operations around the continent. That, after having done some, on the ground, lower level, but as a captain and up at the national level, that was some pretty cool stuff to get to do that.
I want to get into what you're doing now because it sounds awesome. But before we wrap up the military, what was, let's say, the worst experience you had during your career, and what was the absolute best experience you had?
Worst was probably my own doing, because I still reflect on, and I use this as a leadership lesson. I had an NCO, when I was a platoon leader, the Army was transitioning from a thing they had, spec 5, spec 6. They weren't hard striped, because the Army said, you're a damn good bulldozer operator, but you're not a leader. Well, when I first came on active duty, they were just getting rid of that. And in the infamous way of the military, if you have one day in rank longer than the guy next to you, you're in charge. And I had a guy who was one of my section sergeants that should have just kept he shouldn't have ever had the rockers. Should have just been a spec 6. Damn good equipment operator, but not a leader. I had no desire to lead. And I publicly berated him and fired him in front of the platoon at National Training Center out in California. And to this day, it's a great leadership lesson, but I regret it. And for me, 25 years, that's the worst thing, 100%. Best was, I was a team leader with a hand-picked team. Team sergeant and I, Bill Cole, hand-picked this team, and we were 10 months into being a team. We recently finished a 6-month deployment to Bosnia, and we came back. We were a mountain team, and we got a JSET, Joint Combined Exercise Training, I think is what JSET stands for. Basically, it's go train or train with or at some other country. And we got to spend a month in Switzerland, just my team, with 2 Swiss Army Bergführers as our guides. And skiing, alpine training, avalanche training, went south, did rock climbing, and just that one, and then some stuff I got to do in Norway. Those 2, unbelievable.
Crack deals.
Yeah. If you or I if we were to say, hey, let's go to Switzerland and do this, easy 50K each, easy.
Every now and again, you have a lucid moment in the military, and you're like, they're paying me to do X, like whatever that is. And I think everybody in the military has felt good about something and bad about something. If you're pushing a broom or whatever, you're doing fire watch, like, oh my God, this is terrible. But every now and again, you're staying at a 5-star hotel somewhere. You're like, how am I here?
Yep. Oh yeah. When I was doing the NATO SOF thing, I had this vivid image. We had flown into Athens, Greece, and I'd never been to Greece before, and did all our meetings. We were only there for a night, and I remember it was a 5-star hotel. I'd get up to my room, which was way up. I opened the windows, and there's the Acropolis. I mean, all lit up. I was like, how am I here? Probably $1,000 a night room, or especially with a view like that. Oh yeah, There's some. I had lots of those pretty cool moments. We could spend another hour me telling you some of the cool places and things I got to do in those situations.
So career wrapped up. We talk a lot about the transition here. A lot of our company, a lot of the people we know pivoted from the military to the business world, as you did. Did you think your transition after 20 years was difficult? If so, how? And then do you have any major lessons learned you'd share with people going through it now?
Oh, yeah. Transition wasn't hard. It was finding what I wanted to do that was hard because I didn't know. I thought, get out, get a job, work for a company like Lockheed Martin. Dad worked for Lockheed for a number of years. I remember telling him I got a job at Lockheed, and he was excited for me. That job lasted 10 months, and I'll share with you. And by the way, for the last 7 years, I have been coaching guys getting out. That's one of my give backs to our veteran tribe. So I've gone through this many times. One of the best lessons that you could learn, and I got told this by two of my former NCOs that I hired into Northcom as GS guys. And those two lessons, when you take the uniform off, are you can quit and you can say no. You can quit your job anytime. There's no such thing as a 2-week notice. If you don't like it, walk your ass out. Wave to everybody and say, see y'all later, and walk out. That's it. Because you know what? The sheriff ain't coming to arrest you for being AWOL. You're done. Walk out. There's no requirement. Don't stay in a job that sucks. That's number one. Number two, you get to say no, because there's no such thing as a lawful order. There's no such thing as UCMJ. And if your boss says, hey, Rob, I need you to go to this conference next week, and your daughter is having a birthday party, or you know what, you're just sick and tired of traveling, and say, no, hey, boss, I don't want to do that. I doesn't fit in with me. Guess what? The worst he can do is fire you.
There's a lot packed in with what you're saying that I see as a commonality that we do and that we've struggled with. So some of it is be careful for what you wish, because you're in it and you're in the job that you think that you do that pays the money that you think that you deserve and the prestige that you think you require. And at some given point, it's like the frog in the pot of water, and it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and you don't realize that you're in boiling water. And at some point you say, I'm supposed to be happy, and I am absolutely not happy. So that is very real. And when you've gone from a world where you can be removed from your position, you can be shamed, but you're still going to get a paycheck, generally. I mean, unless you or do something illegal, almost like for mid-level performance. If you're an elite person, you only perform high instead of unbelievably high. Like, there's no repercussions. But in this world, if you're doing a job that doesn't align with you and you're unhappy, you probably should do something else, and maybe for less money, maybe for more money. And that is very difficult for veterans to understand, particularly like when they're recently at that first 2-year block, 4-year block out.
Well, I worked for 5 different companies in 7 years, the first 7 years post-retirement. And every one of them, right down to the very last one, I said to myself, and I said to my hiring manager / my manager boss, this is what I'm going to do for the next 20, 25 years until I retire. And every one of them, at the 90-day mark, things just started to, the sexy was gone. The frustrations grew. The 25-minute commute, which was, that's not bad, turned to, God, gotta freaking drive 25 minutes to get there? Jeez, and everything just started. And that's why, I tell everybody, if I hadn't learned those 2 lessons, quitting and saying no, I would be a mouth breather working at Northcom right now. Plus, in between each of those jobs, when I'd quit, I'd consult back to companies doing the exact same damn thing I was doing before. That's how much of a glutton for punishment I was.
How do you know when to quit?
When you can't take it anymore. Everybody's different. It's when you hit that point of, I don't like this. I mean, I had a job in the Army. That job I kind of alluded to when I went to Kosovo. Thank God. That's probably what kept me in the Army, is because I deployed. If I had stayed in that organization, I would have resigned. It was awful. because one of the things I tell guys is there's no such thing as a work-life balance. It's all life. There's no work you, home you. And if you believe that, you're lying to yourself, because that job in DC that I had, I saw it. I was so frustrated in that role and in that organization, how dysfunctional it was, that it carried over to the home life and made it tough on my wife and kids. Tougher than being deployed. It was like, why are you still home? Because this sucks. Let's get out of this. And truthfully, that was Miss Suzanne, my wife's advice was, well, why don't you see if you can get back to 10th Group? We can go back to Colorado and see if you still like the Army then. That's what saved me. Yeah, saved my career, because I would have gotten out. I jokingly say, if the internet was then what it is now, I probably would have hit send on a resignation paperwork online, because, yeah, it was. So when I had that feeling already, and when I got out and I started working for various companies, and each one of those companies, it wasn't, it was definitely it wasn't them, it was me sort of thing, in the breakup, because I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know who I wanted to be, didn't know what I wanted to do. And when you struggle with that, the missing piece is your fulfillment. Money in the bank account does not fulfill you. It's never full enough. If you are chasing the dollar, you'll never be happy. So you have to find some way of being fulfilled, something that pulls you, something that other than your loyalty, because they ain't loyal back. Believe me, I don't care how good that person, how much of a friend you think that guy is. I got laid off, treated like I was going to steal from the company by a guy that I considered my friend, that he said we were friends. He admits now he screwed that up. But you know what? That's what happens. It's business. But that business, when you say it's business, is still your life. You have to know, and this is one of the things I help guys understand, is what's important to you. What are your values? And your values must align with the organization that you are working for. If they do not align, you will never be happy there. And that's what, when I reflect back to the culture of the groups of the companies that I worked for and the departments in those larger companies, that's what the problem was. It wasn't the mission, because, when I first got out working for Lockheed, we were doing special ops stuff, putting kind of contracts to help still help the regiment, if you will. But the organization was, I didn't fit in, because my values did not align with the organization's values. And until you understand that and truly have an understanding of who you are, you're never going to be happy, man. It's just what it is.
Here's an interesting question. Mm-hmm. When you go, I think that people think that they know themselves in the military, and I think they struggle when they come out. So you mentor people. This is something that I've noticed about both myself and hundreds of people that I've talked to over the years. I did business school first. I worked at a big company. I worked at Amazon before I did this job. And I didn't know what I liked when I got out of the military, which sounds like a weird thing, which is to say I didn't know myself in the same way. I knew how to pursue something. I knew how to put the blinders on and go pursue excellence, or what I view to be excellence. I knew how to do that. And I knew that I was somehow satisfied if I could be the best or whatever. And, the chips fell where they did, what I was able to do or not able to do. Right. And then you come out, and what do you want to do? I don't know. So my advice typically to people is you have to try things and then figure out what you do and do that. So basically make an effort, see something, choose what you did or didn't like, move on to the next thing. You went through that, you've iterated, you talk through people. What advice do you give them about learning who they are and making sure that alignment is proper, that their values are the same values, not the mission, but the values? How do you help people identify that? So that's advice for other people.
Yeah, well, you got to understand what your values are. Like for Tribe and Purpose, our values are integrity, service, and continuous learning, and simple, right? And anybody I work with as a client, they have to have those similar values, not the same. That's why I say values need to be aligned. So you have to define it, and you have to write it down so it's real. saying, these are my values in your head is bullshit. You got to write the stuff down, man. Make it real. That's one. And I'll share with you an exercise that I run all my clients, not just military guys, but all my clients through, that I think is so important, because you got to know what right looks like for you. And the way I do it, I call it the ideal day. And the ideal day is a actual date on the calendar. So we're recording this on the 13th of March, 2025. The ideal day I want you to think about and plan for is 5 years from today, 13 March 2030. It's a mark on the calendar. That's a PCS and a half away for those of you in the military. It's not that far. And what you're going to do is you're going to put the most detailed training schedule together. From what time do you wake up? How do you wake up? Do you wake up to an alarm? Do you wake up before the alarm, leave the alarm ball? All these sort of things. When you get out of bed, do you take a piss? Do you brush your teeth? Do you go outside and have a cigarette? What are you doing first? You run through the entire day. What's ideal? And let me describe how ideal feels. Ideal feels like that boulevard that you just despise having to drive down, but for whatever reason the highway's closed or whatever, and you got to go the whole length of this boulevard with all the stoplights and all the traffic, school zones and everything, you name it. The ideal day feels like this. As you come up to that first light and you're letting your foot off the gas to put it on the brake, right as you start to let it off, the light turns green. And you come to the next light. Same thing. Light turns green. Light turns green. You go the whole length of this boulevard without one single red light. You're just flowing. That's what the ideal day feels like. And so it's something that doesn't happen every day. Happens if you're good and put the work in, probably happens once a month, maybe a couple times a quarter. That's not an everyday thing. It's a special day. So if you're a runner, when you get up in the morning, if you run in the morning, what do? Do you run on a treadmill in your home gym? Do you go to a gym and run on a treadmill? Do you run outside? What's it like outside? Is it warm, cold? You're running on a golf course, trail, street, neighborhood, suburb, dirt road, all these sort of things we start to shape. We're not even talking about what we do in our quote, air quote, 9-to-5 shop work payment. And oh, by the way, here's a couple other little things about the ideal day. It must be a day that ends in Y, and you plan it realistically unrestricted, because you can be a multimillionaire in 5 years. You put your mind to it. It's no doubt. I have no doubt you can do that. So you start to put these things together, and we're going to create this crystal clear, detailed image. Because when we have this image that we create in our head, our subconscious starts to look for ways to fulfill it. Think of it, I call this the red truck syndrome. I never saw a red pickup truck until the day I decided I wanted to buy a red F-150. Now that I decided I wanted to buy a red F-150, guess what I see at every freaking intersection? 3 of them in the Walmart parking lot, 5 in the Home Depot parking lot. And I'm thinking to myself, where'd they all come from? Man, did I miss the sale yesterday or what? They were there all along, but it was unimportant information. So the subconscious filter in my mind collecting data nonstop said red trucks were not important. But as soon as I said I wanted a red pickup truck, guess what? My subconscious mind changed the filter to start to identify indicators. When you put the work in, and I mean it's work to do it right, and detail out the ideal day for you, you know what right looks like. And you can put together a plan to have that. And that's a powerful place to be. We should all do that. Miss Suzanne and we do a form of that every year together. But guys that I'm teaching this to, what I always tell them is, hey, start figuring it out for yourself, and then teach your wife. And have her go to her corner of the table or the house or whatever and come up with hers. And y'all come back together and come together with your ideal day for the two of you. Because you'd be surprised. And unlike most, and I'll just share this because I've been around a while, been married almost 38 years now. Women don't like to do that. Guys, we're like, oh yeah, here it is. This is what I want to do. Women are like, oh, well, I'm kind of happy with it. No, honey, I need you to do this. I need you to really think about this and put that together. It's a powerful place to be, man. Some teamwork right there.
You touched briefly on the principles of tribe and purpose. What you just talked about rolls into it, but more specifically, how does your military experience help those who are not in the military through your work at Tribe and Purpose? Kind of give an overview of that.
Well, and I do this with the guys that I'm working with, the soon-to-be veterans. the knowledge that you gain in the military is all the knowledge you need to be successful in business. The only thing you got to figure out is how to run a checkbook for the business, because all those special ops guys, spend our entire career with a blank check. Planning is the most important piece that I've gained from my military time. I've taught a master's degree program called Planning and Program Development. They had no program of instruction when they hired me. Sent me a book. I started reading the book, and I'm like, you know what that is? That's the military decision-making process. So I took the military decision-making process, created an entire POI for this master's level course, translated into civilian speak. Did the same thing when I used to teach project management. Project management is nothing more than the military decision-making process. 5-paragraph field order, mission analysis, what's critical, what are the constraints, all these sort of things. That's how you set yourself up for success. The key to it is the execution. Put the plan together so that your team is on the same sheet of music, and then lead them. You also learn that in the military. You were taught leadership throughout your career. Nobody else gets that. That's one of the things we do at Tribe and Purpose is we teach leadership to executives, because nobody does that. There's a couple of, Fortune 100s that do some leadership training, but it's like a highly selective thing. So it's not like I get promoted from junior manager to manager and I'm going to go to the manager leadership school like we did in the military. Got to figure it out on your own. So that right there, leading people through execution, normal operations, and crisis operations is a skill set that every military guy brings to the table. Planning and leading, those two things.
Awesome. Kind of wrap it up with a lightning round. You're still getting after it. A lot of lessons learned. What are a couple of things you do to prime yourself in the morning to crush the day?
PT. I wake up. I don't wake up to an alarm. I've got wake up early disease. Get up around 4:15.
What time do you go to bed?
9:30, 10.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so 6+ hours. I know I'm supposed to be getting 7. Believe me, I do all the reading on that stuff and go, crap. But I ain't figured that. I ain't cracked that code yet. Go downstairs, and right now I'm still in recovery from my most recent back surgery. So I do about 20 minutes on the bike, do some stretching. And then I come back up here to the office, get a cup of coffee, do my devotional, check my schedule for the day, validate that, do my gratitude list, and then I grab a book and get about 20, 30 minutes of reading in before I go shower and come back in here after I shower, do a meditation, and then have breakfast with Miss Suzanne, and then start helping people have better lives and more success in their life.
I'm curious, because Sam Havelock, who introduced us, has a similar routine. What does your meditation and gratitude practice look like?
Meditation is simple. I use the Calm app. Been using it for years. Big fan of it. Super simple. I know there's a whole bunch of other ones out there. Find the one that works for you. When I started to do it, before I started meditation, I thought it was this woo-woo thing. And for those of you who have that same belief, I'll tell you what you're doing in meditation. Yeah, there's some other benefits. I won't get into those, but here's the real benefit for operator alpha types is meditation is training your mind to focus. It's PT for your mind. That's the way I look at it. So it helps me focus in. And then my gratitude, I use a desktop, a book, journal thing where I have my schedule. And part of that is, at the top of the page is I'm thankful for. So I write my 3 I'm thankful for each morning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Books. What are a couple books that have changed your life? You got a wall behind you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Unbelievable. I'm a big Stoic. I use Stoicism in my weekly newsletters, and I tend to read it a couple of times, parts and pieces of various Stoicism a couple of times a week. The next one is A Book of 5 Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. Highly, highly recommended. It is a tactics book. If you are struggling, I give it to all my rugby coaching friends. It is the secret to success for rugby. I truly believe when you understand the 5 rings. And then The last one is a very business one, and it's called On Selling by Mark McCullough. When we're in the military, we don't realize we're selling. And everybody has this salesman or, it's the slick back used car salesman, outside the gate, right? That's wheeling and dealing with that young sailor soldier that just got the bonus. You're selling everything, man. If you are selling your mission, you are selling your ability to succeed on your team. And when you get out, if you can't sell, your business is not going to be successful, or the business that you're working for is not going to be successful, or you're going to get laid off or fired because the boss is going to look at you. What have you done? Because you're not selling yourself. You're not selling what your capabilities are and what you can do. You have to sell. And that book On Selling, I read it a year or two after I retired. And it was eye-opening for me because I didn't understand all that.
How can people follow you in your work?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best way to get to me directly. Otis McGregor. Dad is doctor, so don't be confused. You can also go to our website, 10xyourteam.net. That is our landing page where we have our programs. You can also follow us, and we'd love it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where our podcast is, 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. Like I was telling you guys in the green room, we've been doing it for almost 6 years now, 400 plus episodes. And love it. And the amount of information from our guests could fill volumes, bookshelves. And then that's also where you can get Whiskey Words, my favorite piece of content, my philosophy, thoughts on various things. And I'm out back, sometimes with a fire, sometimes not, but pretty much with a glass of whiskey and a cigar in my hand. So that's 10xyourteam.net and 10x Your Team on YouTube. So
rock and roll. You got anything else you want to add?
I appreciate all the opportunity to share. And you know what? If you are getting out, if you're still on active duty or even if you have gotten out, the resources out there are immense. I work with the Commit Foundation and the Honor Foundation. Both of those don't cost you a thing but your time, which is your most precious asset. But they're both well worth it. Highly, highly recommend both of those programs for different needs. So if you're curious about those, contact me and I'll give you the once over of what those programs provide you, because they will help you figure out what your next adventure in life will be when you take the uniform off.
Otis, genuinely appreciate your time.
Hey, it's been great, guys. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. If you want to check out more from the podcast, head to zeroeyes.com/nobel, where you can see show notes, read more about our guests, and suggest guests or topics of your own. Until next time, stay in the fight. Don't ring the bell.